Right, we're going to cover texturing next, but I'm going to try to make it as quick as possible because well, it's by far the most time-consuming part of the tutorial, and additionally, there's already a really great tutorial that goes a bit more in depth than I can be, and it's Razer 445's great tutorial here at nextgenhardsurface.com, but you can just Google it. You should be able to find it, and the link is up there, and I'll probably include a link in the description as well. But it's a good read, and it also has a video down at the bottom. But that's enough about that. Our maps rendered nicely, and we'll have to be able to see them in real time somehow. So you'll have to use a game engine like Unreal Engine, Half-Life Model Viewer, whatever, or you can use an application like Marmoset Toolbag, or you can use a DirectX shader inside 3ds Max viewport to preview these maps in normal time. And I have a link to Specular shader, which I also have installed, but I never use it myself. I have the professional version of 3-point shader myself, but it works pretty much the same as Specular shader, pretty much same slots and whatnot. But anyways, let's load some materials in this. So let's load the normal map in the normal map slot and apply. And as you can see, it looks a lot nicer with the normal map applied. The difference would be even bigger naturally if this was a complicated model. On shotguns, it's obviously not as big a difference, but well, you should still be able to see quite a difference in some parts. Looks a lot better, especially the pump has quite a nice difference, and the details in this area. Okay, and I'll use a program I have called NDO2 to bring out a so-called cavity map out from the normal map, but you can do this with several free tools as well, and one of them is called XNormal, which can also be used to render normal maps and such with programs like Blender that don't support it really well. So that's good to keep in mind. And just a sec. Okay. Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just use the preset here to convert the normal map into a cavity mask, and I'll also have to do a little bit of cleaning. Not a whole lot, but those errors are kind of icky, so I don't want those in my texture, and I'll just smudge it slightly. Yeah, not a perfect fix, but it's close enough. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this cavity mask, and I'm gonna take the ambient occlusion map, which is basically a global shadows overlay, and I'm gonna duplicate this layer by Ctrl J, and I'll set it to multiply, and I'll just fill the bottom layer with 50% gray, and I'll also apply the cavity mask, and I usually like to blur the cavity mask just a little bit. Maybe 1 or 2 passes of blur. Okay, that's pretty cool. I'll save this as M37. Oh, not M36. And oh, just a second. Okay, sorry about that. I noticed that my recording was off a bit for some reason. Probably has something to do with me using dual screens. It's kind of wonky sometimes. But anyways, what I now want to do is I'm gonna use text tools to render out a couple of helper maps. So basically, I'll hit text map here and hit size to match the size of the other maps, and I'll hit the wire first to render out a nice wireframe overlay. That's pretty cool. And I'll set it to screen over the texture with, let's say, like 30 or 20%, and I can just toggle it on and off easily. And I'll also want to render out a blockout map. Oh, just a sec, I'll have to disable light tracer first. Actually, it's not. I'll just disable the hammer sleeve then. Yeah, that's a lot better. What this does is basically it exports every element on the model into a different color. So I can basically just magic wand the entire pump or the entire receiver. Really nifty. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set up some layer groups. I'll put these all in their own group. Actually, I'll just put these two in their own group. Hit Ctrl plus J to group them, and I'll call them helpers. And I'll also duplicate this layer and delete it because I can't. The background layer is by default locked, but I'll delete the background layer. And let's call this metal base. And I'll also group this. And I have a plugin called VTools for Photoshop. Razor's tutorial glosses over how to use it. Basically, it exports marked layer groups to separate textures, which you can easily plug into different slots in your 3D application. And I'll just call this D for diffuse, which is our base map. And I'll use the selection mask for the stock and the pump, and I'll expand the selection by a few pixels just to be on the safe side. And new layer, and I'll just overlay them with let's see, I don't have any wood patterns here, but I'll just fill it with a color, and I'll toss a wood pattern there at some point, but let's call that wood base. And I'll also group different materials to their own groups. Okay, and that base metal is way too light, so I'll darken it a lot, and I want this to be a little blue, so I'll hit Ctrl plus B to bring up the color balance, and I'll give it a slight cyan and a slight blue tint. And okay, I'll darken it even more. And just a sec, I'll make sure my monitor is set to Adobe RBG. Yes, it is. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna duplicate the diffuse group and call it S for specular. And what a specular map does is it controls the intensity of your highlights. So the brighter something is on your specular map, the more shine it has. So for instance, something like cloth would be very dark on a specular map, whereas something like metal would probably be pretty light but I'll show you how it works. And on the specular map, the colors affect it as well. And for the wood, I'll inverse the color and slightly desaturate, okay, desaturate a lot. But I won't do it for the metal, because when you think about it, if you look at metal, especially tinted metal, when light hits it, it also gets a blue tint. But when you look at something like wood, it's usually coated, and the coating has a completely white highlight. But now you might be asking why, if the highlight should be white, why am I not making the specular for the wood parts white? The reason is that most shaders are not gamma corrected, so, and they apply the specular additively, so the color of the diffuse affects the underlying. I mean, the underlying diffuse affects the color of the highlight as well, even though it shouldn't. So we'll have to use the opposite color, a slight opposite color for the wood to actually get a neutral highlight out of it. But I'll leave it at that, and I'll brighten the metal on the specular a lot. And I'll save it, and I'll use a hotkey that saves. Oh, sorry, that's not good. Okay. Sorry, I'll have to cut again. Apparently, I'll have to tweak the hotkeys a bit, mismatching hotkeys with hypercam and such. Okay, that should do the trick. So now when I hit that hotkey, it saves the specular to S and the diffuse to D, which is cool. And I can just plug these into max nicely. The diffuse as well. And as you can see, the diffuse affects the highlights a lot, and the highlight should look a little better. Of course, we'll have to add more than just plain colors to make it pretty, but this is the foundation of our texture, which we'll build upon. And I'll also want to, before I do anything more, I'm going to go to the ambient occlusion, and on the end of the barrel, I'm going to paint the end of the barrel completely black on the ambient occlusion overlay, because it should look like it's, hopefully should look like it's hollow. Actually, just make a new layer for it. Oh, fuck it, I'll just use the ellipse tool. And I'll click somewhere to rasterize it, and I'll blur it just slightly. And let's see if that works. Yep, that works. And I'll do the same for the ejection port here as well, for the inner part here. And I'll just use the burn tool to darken around it a bit. Now that should work. Yep, that's good. Kind of a dirty hack, but I don't care. And the scene is a little blonde with just one light, but let's use just one light to set up our base materials before going all fancy. And I'll just plug this in here and move it slightly. Okay. I'll have to, as you can see, I'll have to tweak the material selections just a bit. Probably should have done that before I did the wood base, but it doesn't really matter. I can actually just do it even better. I can fill the entire, I'll actually select the shape first and go to the wood, and I'll hit here to make a quick mask for the entire layer group, and I can just fill the entire wood base with the base material, and it'll still retain the edges due to the layer mask, which is really cool. And now I can just edit the mask on this thing to make the remove the parts that should be metal. And I'm not going to be too concerned about selection here. I'll just try to make it rather quickly. Oops. Let's just backtrack a bit. And this should go as well. And here as well. Just go to layer mask and fill these areas with black to remove them from the layer mask. I'll just feather selection by 1 pixel before I do, and I'm gonna do it here as well. Kind of a sloppy selection, but I don't care. Yeah, alright. Feather it first and then fill with black. And that should hopefully do the trick. Yeah. Looks great, even on the pump here. And looks like I'll have to do it on the inner face as well. I'm not actually sure if the inner face has an, well, I guess I'll remove it from that part as well, just for the sake of consistency. Don't know if that actually fixed anything. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the layers mask on the channels tab here, and I'll just copy paste it into the specular map because I'm lazy. And okay, I'm gonna make one more selection here for these floaty parts here. And perhaps the front side as well. And yeah, I'll have to manually add these. Since they're not an element. And I'll just duplicate them from the metal base, and I'll lighten them up some and I'll use the color and balance to give them a slight yellowish tint. That should be good, just to give it some visual interest. And I'll also duplicate them into the specular map. Give them even more brightness there. Okay. I'll just duplicate this shotgun with the angle snap toggle on, so I can see the other side as well at the same time with ease. And oh yeah, I'll for the normal map I'll want to add some text here. For the I actually have to check for the text, but just throw in a couple of serial numbers here and there. But basically how this works is I'll just show you. Let's say, well, that's too fake. Yeah, that's probably a bit better. I'll just tweak it slightly. And rotate by 180 degrees. And add it in the barrel as well. Okay, maybe not. Maybe I'll just leave it on the receiver. But basically, you can do this with the NDO2 program I showed, or there's another way. I'll give the normal map its own PSD. I'll make a new layer between these, which is filled with neutral gray. And when I run this through the NVIDIA normal map plugin, basically what happens is that recessed areas are in black and raised areas are in white. So if I want this text to look like it's engraved in the mesh, I'll make it look darker, and I'll just use the normal map filter. Actually, I have to temporarily merge it. I'll go back in history, but I'll just use pretty much the default settings with maybe slightly stronger scale. And okay, one thing, the NVIDIA plugin seems to default to green up, green down for some reason. So I'll have to flip the green channel by hitting Ctrl I, and that's our normal map text. I'll just copy this and go back a few steps, and I'll overlay it. But before I do, I'll have to go to Channels, Blue Channel, Complete Black, and 50% opacity, and click once, and then hit Overlay. And that should do the trick. Let's see if it works. Sure, it's actually it should work, but it's not working for some reason. It's like that sometimes. I'll name it something else. It might load then. Yep, loads when I rename the file to something else. there's any difference. Otherwise, yeah, that's pretty cool. And I'll also remake the cavity mask from the newly created normal map to also just to introduce that text bit into the cavity mask. And I'll just go here and blur it slightly. Okay, the text is a little bit powerful, so I'll just create a mask for it and darken it on the mask just slightly. Okay, not that much. And I'll also do the fix here quickly again. No big deal, but I'll do it anyway. And let's see how that looks like. And that's pretty cool. Doesn't look half bad, in my opinion. And let's also make a gloss map. Now, Specular map controls the intensity of highlights. What gloss does, it controls the width of the highlights. So if I set gloss to 1, you can see it's rather matte. But if I set it something to like 99, it's very shiny and pinpoint lighting. So you can control that with a map as well, and that's exactly what we want to do here. So let's duplicate the gloss and call it G for duplicate the specular and call it G for gloss. And in some engines gloss can use color, but in most engines it can't, so I'll just desaturate everything here. Or alternatively, I could just add an adjustment layer to do that for me and keep it inside the gloss map. And I'll just make everything flat gray for now, and I'll tweak it from there to get the effect I want. And hopefully it exported. Didn't export yet. Okay, that should work. Okay, and what I'm also going to do is I'm going to move the helpers group under the gloss so that it's not affected by them, but I'll duplicate the group and put it inside the gloss, and I'm gonna inverse these. I'm gonna invert the ambient occlusion map and set it to screen, which is basically the opposite of multiply, and I'll also invert the cavity mask here to get a nice effect. I'm not sure if it actually affects anything that much, but yeah, it's a little better. Makes the edges from the cavity mask pop out a little better maybe, and it's pretty matte looking at the moment, so I'll brighten some things up a bit, especially the metal. Brighter is more intense highlight, and darker is a more sparse highlight. similar to raising and lowering the value. Yeah, I think that amount of gloss looks okay. Actually, I have to consult my reference pictures here. Actually, I'll make it a little glossier. And I'll even make the wood base somewhat glossier. And I'll also brighten the wood on the specular a lot, because it should look like it's varnished. And I'll desaturate it a lot. Okay, maybe not all that much. And it's still not glossy enough. So basically, texturing with shaders is a lot of trial and error, and I'll probably cut off the video at some point after I've shown you the basics, because texturing this entire thing will take me so much time that nobody wants to sit through it. Well, I might record it for the shits and giggles, and maybe I'll put it up as a time lapse or something, but I can't promise you anything. And yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with the material setup at the moment. So what I'm gonna do now is we're gonna start defining the materials here more, and there's a great texture library called cgtextures.com, and if you're registered here, you can get a shitload of great textures, and Race's tutorial is probably better in that sense. He kind of explains how to use them effectively, and he's really better at utilizing them than I am in that sense. And I'll just see. Okay, that's actually okay. I'll see if that works. I'll start with the specular map, because especially with metal, it's at least I think it's by far our most important map, because, well, lighting pretty much defines materials. And just actually I'll go into a separate file and resize it. Luckily this is a tiling texture, so I can just, well, tile it. That should be an okay base. And I'll give it some. Actually, I'll just mess with it. It's slightly blue at the moment. I'll unblue it and overlay it over my base color. Yeah, it's still kind of blue. That should be pretty neutral, hopefully, and I'll see what that does. And yeah, as you can see, it changes the highlight to a lot nicer. I'm going to use the same texture on the diffuse as well, but I'm going to be tricky and rotate it around to give both textures some unique details. And set this to overlay as well. So darken the metal base slightly. So I want it to be really dark. And yeah, that's pretty cool for a base. And we could also put it on the gloss, but I'm not too concerned about the gloss right now. Yeah, you'll have to kind of mess around with it to really learn what it does effectively. But anyways, well, I'll just start defining this here. I'll try duplicating the cavity mask to see if it pops out the details a little better. Yeah, that's a little better. And okay, and I think that's good enough base material. It's pretty simple, but like I said, Race's tutorial is great. You should watch it after watching mine and after you're comfortable with the basics. But just a sec, and I'm gonna bust my tablet out as long as I can find it somewhere. Okay. And I'm just gonna create a new layer here in the let's say, actually I'll just group these on their own, and let's call this damage. And basically I'm just gonna quickly look at some refs and try to replicate some of the damage I see here. As you can see, this is pretty shiny. I'm making mine not quite as shiny, but not this matte either. But seriously, you can just get great ideas from reference pictures like this. You can see the nice oily marks here, and well, if you're using your head, the oily marks should obviously be mostly in the specular map, so that they're visible when the light hits them, but not as much when the light isn't hitting them. But I usually do some soft edge damage first, and I'll just set this to soft light. And I'll just wear some of these edges down a bit. It's basically just like painting. Racer does it a bit differently. He utilizes photos to pull nice damage shapes out of, and it works a lot better than my method, especially since I kind of have to use this tablet. So I suggest, really suggest watching his tutorial and really listening to his tips. He's a great artist. And now you can see that when I apply the specular map change, it's pretty slight, but it's there anyway on the specular, well, on this side anyway. I'll make it a little more intense and a little sharper maybe. I'm just using my mouse right now, and I'll also delete some of this. Now let's see if that works a little better. Yeah, well, slightly better. Anyway, I'll just move the light down a bit so we can actually see it. Well, it's a bit hard to see right now, but should be okay when we're done, hopefully. And the gloss map will help a lot as well in bringing this damage out here. And I'm just painting some scratches here because I feel like it. I'll also have some brushes, and I have linked to these in the video description. At least most of them. I can't share exactly. Can't share my current set since I have some brushes I can't share, but most of them are there, and you should be able to work with them nicely. And if you have any other brushes, those should work as well. And let's just apply. As you can see, the scratches are almost invisible when light isn't hitting them, but when it is, it looks pretty nice. And just if I duplicate that layer, it intensifies the effect even more. That's maybe a little closer to what I was looking for. So I'll change the layer type here from soft light to normal, and maybe just slightly tone down some parts. And in addition to these scratches here, I'll also put some, let's see, dirty stuff or something, and set that to overlay and use the black color on that. And I'll just use a regular brush with a relatively low opacity, let's say 6, and I'll just paint some less shiny parts here. Let's say it's dirty or something, I have no idea, but you can easily see them, this kind of stuff from reference pictures as well. And I'll also put some on the damage layer with the white brush, some subtle effect. And it's pretty simple, but it looks okay. It's not great by any means, but for the purposes of this video, it's okay. And if I contrast that effect slightly and darken the base even more, it should produce a pretty cool effect. Yeah, that's kind of what I had in mind. Now you can really see what this specular map is doing, and when light isn't hitting it, it's pretty clean looking, and we'll pass some of that damage onto the diffuse later on as well, but that's good enough for now. And for the wood, we'll also use CG textures. Let's try to find a nice pattern. Wonder what type would work best. Maybe something like this. Not entirely sure, but I'll just take something and try applying it on the wood base here. I'll just hide the specular, and it's a bit large right now, so I'll try tiling it some. Okay, might not work perfectly, but it's not perfect, but it's almost seamless. And also do the same vertically. Maybe move it around a bit so it isn't exactly the same. Maybe I'll scale it down a bit. And just duplicate it for the pump as well. Just delete the overlapping parts and duplicate it for these parts here as well. And let's try darkening that. How it looks like. It's not the best texture in the world, but it might look okay. Yep, definitely needs some work, but I actually kind of like the base pattern in here. I'll probably use another one, something like this, and layer this on top of that to make it slightly rough looking. Let's try mixing these. Actually, perhaps I'll have to contrast these base ones slightly. Desaturate it slightly too. Let's see how that works. Yep, that's a lot better. It's quite saturated at the moment, so I'll darken it and desaturate it by quite a bit, because I like my wood dark and I like my wood red. And yeah, the base pattern here looks a lot more interesting than the one I have going on, but you can pretty much mess around with the bases yourself and learn how it works. And on the specular, I'm not going to put, because it's coated, the pattern shouldn't affect the wood here, so I'll overlay something else on top of it. Let's see if this works with some blur. Desaturate it, maybe. Yeah, that should work. And it's a bit dark, maybe. And let's see how that works. Yeah, that's not too bad, but it's a bit blurry at the moment, so I'll try not blurring it, at least not that much, and I'll actually just remove some of that contrast and overlay it. Actually, I will not overlay it. Just let's try tossing more stuff on top, and I'm darkening the wood coating near to metal, because, well, if you think about it, the impurities from the metal kind of, well, if you study pictures of old guns, usually the parts around the near the metal parts are kind of desaturated and not as shiny. So I'll try messing with it and seeing how it works. There, that's a lot better. Looks pretty cool, actually. I'll just make some random smudges here. Let's try again. Yeah, that's cool. And now if I take the metal damage from the specular and pull it into the gloss map. Let's see. I should actually probably open the gloss map first. And on the gloss map I'll actually invert it. Well, again, it makes sense. We want a wide highlight for the scratches, like that. And now that's pretty cool. And I'll just tone down the scratches on the spec some, but that's pretty much the effect I was going for. And the scratches are a bit fake looking at the moment since they're hand painted, but I can't be asked to make it perfect for the purposes of tutorial. And I'll just maybe tone it down a little on the gloss. Yeah, that's cool. And maybe rotate it just a bit. Reset the pivots first. And I'll rotate these just slightly. Okay, and mess with the barrel next. And I'll see if I can find a brush that's pretty cool. I also sometimes use a brush like this, kind of a rough brush. I think it's included in the pack, and basically what I do is I make it a little bigger and I paint something. Actually, just completely lay right. Yeah, I'll fill something with, let's say, pretty bright, and set it to normal and mask it, invert mask, and paint on the mask with, let's say, well, white obviously reveals what's on the layer, and then I'll kind of remove parts of the stuff I just brushed in. If I brighten it a little bit, I could also use this instead of the image I have right now. And again, it's probably kind of fake looking, but I'm not putting too much effort into this. But it can be a cool effect if used well. Anyway, I'll move on to the barrel here. And I'll just spam some stuff here. Usually all my textures are consist of messing around until it looks good to me. Pretty cool effect. Quite simple, but I like it. And I'll just toss some grunge brushes in the mix as well. Not really putting much thought into this, but of course, when you have time and you're texturing stuff, try to use logic where you would get scratches and stuff, and stuff like dust accumulating into corners and crevices. It's pretty much common sense, and reference pictures help a lot as well. See how it works. I'll disable the gloss map for now since I'm not working on it, and I'll put the gloss to 10 for the time being. Well, of course, I have to actually reload this. And I'm gonna try and see what happens if I introduce more lights in the scene. So 3-point shader can use up to 3 lights, and it can also use cube map reflection, which is pretty cool. And yeah, that's not bad at all. Just move this up a bit maybe, and tweak the intensities a bit. And maybe even add some color. Okay, maybe a little more. And I'll just move that up just slightly. Okay, maybe not that slightly. Okay, that's pretty good. And I'll also temporarily apply a ambient light and ambient cube map to the shader. Just have to blur them and tone them down a lot. And the in 3-point shader, the reflection map uses a different mask, so I'll have to probably well, I'd have to make it, but I'm disabling it for now. I'm just using the ambient lighting to light up some dark spots. But as you can see, even the other side is, I think it looks pretty good, even though I've like zero work put into it. And with some thought, you can quickly make some pretty good looking stuff. I'll just quickly tone these lights down some, because they're maybe a little too bright at the moment. I mean the entire scene is. That's probably a little closer to how I want it to look like. And I'm just gonna keep messing with this till it looks good. Just quickly brush some manual damage in here. Okay, that's maybe a little too strong. Be really lazy and just duplicate this part here for the other side as well. Just tweak it some so it doesn't look exactly the same. That's pretty cool. Just have to desaturate the wood base some. It looks really too. So minus 30, minus 20%. Yep, that's a lot better. And maybe 10 to hue to make it slightly yellower. Yep, that's really good. That's exactly actually what I had in mind. And well, really all that's left to do is a lot of digging around with the texture until it looks good. I'm gonna keep recording for a while, unless in case you guys want to keep watching, but I think you hopefully should have learned some basics at least by now. And of course, feel free to shoot me any questions if you're feeling stumped, or if something is confusing you. I'm more than happy to help. Okay, I think I'm going to call the Specular done for the purpose of this tutorial, and I'm just gonna duplicate some of this stuff into the gloss map. Not everything, but some of it. And let's see. Okay, yeah. Definitely need that new image layer there. And just slightly raise it there, just pretty damn strong on the receiver. The wood, some on the wood as well. And I'll try putting a simple overlay on this entire texture on the gloss just for the hell of it. And just slightly. And let's see how that looks like. Actually, I think I kind of screwed up there, so I have to move this back to the wood. Okay. Yeah, that's the problem. I was wondering why it looked kind of weird. Just make this a little less prominent on the gloss here. Okay, let's see how that works. Not bad actually, not bad. I'll have to tone the damage down a bit. Well, actually quite a lot. But I do like the effect. Let's say 60. And finally I'll pass on some of these layers into the diffuse as well. Yeah, maybe not that much, but just slightly. But if your engine doesn't support gloss maps like Fallout New Vegas, then you'll want to push the diffuse texture, the diffuse a lot more, since you'll have to compensate for the lack of a diffuse map. Lack of a gloss map, I mean. And I'll also want this to have a desaturating effect, so I'll colorize it, brighten it just slightly, and make it entirely blue, and now you can see that it actually desaturates it because it's an opposite color. And it's kind of the effect I'm after here. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I'll try sharpening the resulting maps slightly and seeing how that looks like. I usually sharpen my maps before I put it into a game. Okay, that's pretty cool, if I may say so myself. So of course some areas like this bit here could use some more damage, but it doesn't really matter. And I'll show quickly how it looks like from a first-person perspective. Of course the lighting would need to be moved around a bit and such, but anyways. And the farm is a separate object, like it should. I mean, I can easily make it a separate object, and there's no shadow underneath it because we moved it when baking. And I could put some scratch marks here and such if I wanted to, but I think you can figure that stuff out on your own. But hey, thanks for watching, and I really hope you were able to learn something. And do send me a message if you have any questions, or if you made something using my tutorial. I'm always interested to see the results.